WWDC is just 9 days away, June 8th through the June 12th. And if all of these leaks are accurate, this could be one of the biggest Apple events in years. Not because of the software, not because of the hardware, but because this is Tim Cook's last year for the Apple keynotes. And his successor, John Ternus, is supposed to appear on stage with him. There's a lot to unpack, so here's everything that we know and everything that we're expecting heading into June 8th. So a brief note on context, WWDC stands for Worldwide Developer Conference. Apple runs this every year in June, and it's supposed to be mainly a software event. This is where Apple previews the next iOS, iPadOS, macOS, tvOS, and visionOS. The keynote that's on day one is usually the public-facing event. Developer betas usually drop the same time that the keynote ends. And then public betas follow in July, and then the actual thing releases along the new iPhones in September. This year, the keynote will be on June 8th at 10 a.m. Pacific time. It will be streamed on Apple's website, Apple TV, and on YouTube. So why does this particular WWDC conference carry more weight than usual? Because Tim Cook is stepping down as CEO and being replaced with John Ternus, they're supposed to be here on stage alongside each other. Now, John Ternus is currently the Senior Vice President of Hardware Engineer, and he actually created Apple Silicon. So that's the entire backdrop, and let's see what's actually going to be announced. So the headline story of this event is definitely going to be Siri. So it's supposed to be a big overhaul, and to explain why this is a big deal, we got to go back to WWDC 2024. At this time, Apple introduced Apple Intelligence and overpromised and underdelivered. When it was first announced, the reactions were high, people were excited, it's Apple, how could they mess this up, right? Then it was delayed a ton, it carried on into 2025 and even into now 2026, and a lot of the features we still don't have. It's not more conversational and contextual, it can't really generate images, it has to rely heavily on ChatGPT to do anything useful. There was actually a class action lawsuit for over $250 million because Apple just didn't deliver on any of their promises. So WWDC 2026 is Apple's answer. Supposedly, the new Siri is being rebuilt from the ground up, and it's going to have new features that were promised in 2024. So here's what the leaks describe. First, Siri is supposed to get a new home in the dynamic island. Apple's own WWDC tagline, coming up bright, and people actually kind of narrowed this down to this idea. I'm curious on phones like the 16E and the 17E that don't have a dynamic island how this will work, but this is what we're expecting. And then second, there is a standalone Siri app. It's got a chat-based user interface, kind of like ChatGPT or Gemini. It'd have like memory with persistent conversations and deep thinking involved. So it'd be like a modern AI assistant, but instead of using a third-party app, it'd be within Apple's ecosystem. Third, and this is where it gets interesting, Siri has partnered with Google Gemini to make it better. They're using Siri and Gemini combined kind of as a backbone for Siri's features, that way it doesn't get too overwhelmed. And fourth, this is a pretty heavy rumor, but there's supposed to be something called an extension. The reporting suggests that iOS 27 will allow users to pick which AI model that they want to use. You could have it say, hey, use ChatGPT for this, use Claude for this, use Gemini for this, and it would actually be pretty cool if they actually use this. It is noting that the credibility is pretty dicey because Apple has promised on these kind of things before and they just haven't delivered. So stepping back from Siri, what else is expected in iOS 27? Well, people speculate that it's a performance and integration instead of actually a visual overhaul like it was last year. iOS 27 will be sorting out some major bug fixes that iOS 26 caused. That said, there are some specific additions that may be worth keeping an eye on. The Calendar and Health app are supposed to get AI features that are under the hood. Smarter scheduling intelligence with Calendar, and the Health app, you can take a picture of the nutrition label and it will log it for you. The Camera app is also reportedly getting a dedicated Siri mode with this too. The idea is that you can ask Siri what's in a photo and it can pull up contextual information that's in that photo and give it back to you. Now, do I think they'll actually implement this feature? No. However, this does sound a lot like visual intelligence, so it could just be a minor upgrade to that. Wallet is supposed to expect a create a pass feature, and this one actually sounds pretty useful. You can point your camera and take a picture of a membership card, a passport, a concert ticket, and it will use AI and create a digital photocopy of it. And then Safari might get like some sort of like auto grouping tabs. There also may be a liquid glass intensity slider, so that way your pictures don't get too distorted on your lock screen. And finally, autocorrect may get an upgrade where it can actually sub out entire sentences to make it cleaner, but I wouldn't really like this. That sounds like a bad idea. So on the MacBook, there are also some pretty cool things that are going to happen. macOS 27 is supposed to get something called a snow leopard phase, where they just kind of like sort out some bugs and don't really add a ton of new features. They did something like this similar back in 2009, and people considered it one of the best upgrades to the Mac of all time. So just like your phone, The Mac will also get other Apple Intelligence features that come with your phone. There are also reports that they may add some sort of like software features in the Mac to lay the groundwork for the Touch MacBook. We feel as though John Ternus is actually really excited and likes the idea of a touch-enabled MacBook. For the other platforms, watchOS, tvOS, visionOS, there's not going to be a whole new consistent features. It's just going to be small incremental upgrades. If your device supports it, it will get those Apple Intelligence features, but if it doesn't, then you're just kind of left with like basic upgrades. And so hardware is one of the most speculative categories at WWDC because sometimes they release some new products and sometimes they don't. This year, the hardware likability is pretty low, but there are a few things keeping track of. Apple already released some hardware back in spring of 2026, including the MacBook Neo, the MacBook Pro, the MacBook Air, the iPad Air, and so you may not see as many cool things as those. The product that most people would like to see at WWDC 2026 is probably the Mac Mini and the Mac Studio. The Mac Studio is reportedly going to get an M5 Ultra or M5 Max chip, while the Mac Mini is going to get an M5 chip. However, people are believing that this is going to be pushed back to October 2026 because of RAM delays. The Apple TV 4K is rumored to get an upgrade with an A17 Pro chip and HDMI routing. This is the most likely product if they release any for WWDC 2026, just because it's like something that there's easy release, but also it can be a cool upgrade. The HomePod Mini 2 has floated around with upgraded Siri, advanced features like different colors, and a better ultra-wideband chip. And the HomePad, Apple's rumored 7-inch touchscreen HomePod display. If this does launch, you can expect the same Siri and Apple Intelligence upgrades to go along with everything else. So my straightforward read on WWDC 2026 is don't expect any major Mac announcements or any like new iPhone launches. Those aren't gonna happen. And the only thing that I really suspect may happen is an Apple TV. So here are a few assessments of me before the keynotes. This is Apple's most important software moment since the first iPhone, and that's not even an exaggeration. Apple is in a critical condition with their AI, and if they don't really pick up the pace, they could fall even farther behind, and new companies could add new features, and they could go. However, if Apple delivers on a generally useful AI assistant, it resets the narrative. If they don't, then they could be cooked. The bar is high, and the press will not be forgiving. Whether you follow Apple history or not, it is worth noting that Tim Cook has led their evaluation from $350 billion to $3 trillion. He's introduced the Apple Watch, AirPods, Apple Silicon, the Vision Pro. The core question is not whether Apple will announce a new Siri, but whether it will be good enough that they won't get hammered even farther, and if it is good enough, then it may make up for that 2 years of delays. That covers the entire pre-show for the WWDC 2026 conference, and if you want to see it after it's finished, then you can click that subscribe button. I'll post an entire follow-up video talking about what I said was right, what I said was wrong, and I'll rate each of the new versions. Drop your prediction in the comments. Will Apple actually make a useful Siri, or is this just another year of promises?